problems now in political and military process between Russia and Chechnya, and now around Chechnya. You know, it's during this 20 years war, 29 years war, we lost 300,000 civilians, 40,000 of them children. And every time when international community try to involve and find a peaceful solution of this conflict, is halted by the thesis of territorial integrity of Russian Federation. Why you mentioned just like if war ends today, tomorrow Russia will be there. Yes, of course, if Russia stay as empire, Russia will be there. And we will continue to have these problems with Russia. And for this reason, I'm deeply convinced that the economic interest of certain countries or political interests of certain politicians should not be more important than a fate of hundreds nations which now have colonized by Russia. And these nations want to be free. And international community and government of Italian government, we should, according to international rules, international principles and rules, self-determination. All nations have right to self-determination. And we should be following these rules. If Russia will stop the war now and will remain as empire, it never will be stopped. We will have new aggression against somebody, or Ukraine, or different European countries. This is, you remember some joke which Putin said, it's Russia empire do not have borders. This is nature, is imperial nature, and we have to know that, and we should be following and acting knowing this. Russia is empire, Russia is evil, and we should do something. What we should do? We have to give rights, opportunity to nations to be free, and they will be responsible for their future, and they have to be new. They have to have their own states and all independence and freedom. And I hope Italian politicians they have been involved our tragedy. I know 20 years and radical party, they some initiate process in European Parliament, and they recognize a genocide of Chechen republics in what happened with us 1944 when we've been deported from entire nation, and we lost 50% our population. 50% our population. This war, we lost 300,000, 30% of our population. And people who knows Russia, and we're worried about why we're supporting Ukraine. We know if Ukraine will lose this war, its civilization, our civilization will lose. And we will be victims of new aggressions, Russia empire. I hope we will follow and we will remember this way, these things. Thank you very much.
Which in Odessa when it was developing in the end of 18th and beginning of 19th century was Italian. That was Italian merchants and we have the streets of the central part of Odessa are paved by Italian stones because ships from Odessa were taking grain and wheat to Italy, and coming back they were taking these stones. So we are little Italy too. So, by the way, welcome to Odessa. Next year, we plan to make the first Black Sea Security Conference in Odessa, and we will be happy to have Italian representatives there. That would be very important for us. But coming back to what you asked, I just want to tell you, definitely that's a very big question, like you said, what to do with Russia and how to estimate. But I think, the first things first. And first we need to win in Ukraine in order to stop Russia. What to do, the first thing what to do with Russia is to stop Russia. Then we will need to think about our next steps. Unfortunately, we have not stopped Russia yet. That is the reality which we need to say. And that's what I want to tell you. The situation on front line is extremely difficult. Russian army is battle-hardened. Russian army is quickly developing with cooperation with China, Iran, and this is a completely new warfare. When a drone which costs $400 destroys like the tank which costs $5 million, or Ukrainian sea drone destroys Russian, which costs like $5,000-6,000, destroys Russian military ship in Black Sea, which costs $15 million. That's completely new warfare. And this new warfare, only two countries in the world know, Ukraine and Russia, for the moment. We need to understand that Russian economy is completely on war footage, and they continue to ramp up their military production. They have enormous manpower, especially taking into account that they don't count their people, they don't care about people. So for them, losses 100,000, 200,000 is absolutely okay. Also, by the way, they're using this war to make genocide of these small nations, indigenous people like Buryati, Chеченцы, Avarцы, and others, and many other nations. So they first of all send in these young men to die in Ukraine, and by this they by one shot they're attacking Ukraine. At the same time, they're decreasing the possibility of these nations to resist and to uprise. So what is very important, and that's what we are very much appreciating position of Italian government on support of Ukraine, especially as you told, we're always in Ukraine concerns, and we were not so sure about Italian position. I'm sorry to say this, and we are so happy now. We are really so happy having Italy as a strong ally. And when you said that Russia was never a direct threat to Italy, I think this time happens now. Russia is a threat to Italy today, because Russia is a threat to the whole free world. And if Russia will not be stopped now in Ukraine, they will definitely attack again. They just can't go back to peaceful life. They just can't get back on peaceful rails. They will continue, they will start a new war after ending of hostilities in Ukraine. The only question is where. So the best way to prevent this new war is to win over Russia in Ukraine. And it is possible. But for this we need to receive real support. You know what's going on in the United States. Very difficult situation. Our president today is there. We're all watching what will happen. You know, and I am very much interested, maybe you will know after meeting with the Prime Minister, what the situation will be on European Council this week, because we hear very concerning signals from Hungary, and recently also from Austria. We don't know about Slovakia. We can't understand finally their position. So that, and I should tell you that for us it will be very huge problem for our moral if there will not be decision of European Council, because the whole population of Ukraine is watching, because people, they need to understand and they need to know that our allies are together with us, that we have the light in the end of the tunnel. That's something very important for us. Finally, what I want to finish with, because I represented Odessa region, I think really Black Sea and special role of Italy there is very important and possible, because what Putin is trying to do in Black Sea, blocking commercial navigation, is very dangerous. Because if Putin can block the Black Sea, why he can't try to block Baltic Sea, and then Chairman Xi will try to block Southern Chinese Sea, where 80% of semiconductors of the world are shipped, and so on. So that can be a huge problem, and Italy, being a strong military navy force and country, which is very much sea country and Mediterranean country, I think here can be a special role of Italy, and I hope that you will do your part to open the navigation in the Black Sea, to stop this blackmailing, because that's something we desperately need. Thank you very much, and just again, big thanks, grazie mille to all Italian people and Italian government, Italian parliament, for all the support you are giving to Ukraine for us. It's absolutely, like for us, stunning and we will appreciate it always, and Italy can count on Ukraine as we count on you today. Thank you.
In Chechnya, I remember very well that while the people were dying, civilians were dying in Grozny, in Europe the main idea was, well, the young president might make Russia more liberal. And that was so contrary to what was happening in Russia itself at the time. The journalists were killed in their house. Anna Politkovskaya was murdered just for telling the truth about the atrocities committed by Russian regime in Chechnya during the Second Chechen War and first one as well. We didn't see those signs because of the force of Russian propaganda, and because internationally the diplomats were saying that it's their internal affair, or it's the fight against the terrorism, and basically Russia learned very well how to turn our democratic principles and way of life against the democracies. We didn't see the appropriate reaction when Russia went outside of its borders and occupied Crimea and started war in Donbass, as again Russian propaganda was more loud in saying that Crimea is the historically Russian territory, and in Donbass there are no Russian forces. On the 24th of February we all saw, and finally the world woke up from that sweet propaganda that was easy to believe and nice to believe, but was actually leading us to the joint catastrophe. And now I'm happy to say that the world has united around helping Ukraine, but also by helping Ukraine, helping to return the world into the realm of international law. And that's the main thing we need to remember and do on all the levels, is to return us and to return Russia in whatever shape or form to the rule of international law. Now, while Russia is staying within its borders and while the Ukrainian land remains occupied, it is not going to happen. We are talking about the victory of Ukraine and restoring territorial integrity of Ukraine for a reason. We shouldn't be talking about whether or not the atrocities or the fighting can end tomorrow or 1 year later or in 5 years. The fighting is going to end only when Russia leaves all Ukrainian land and we can restore internationally recognized borders of Ukraine. Ukraine is not going to recognize anything else, and neither should the world. So regardless of how many activations or how active the fighting on the front line is, we're in this fight for 10 years already. Now the world joined us almost 2 years ago, and it made our fight more efficient. It made our army stronger with Western technologies. But we're fighting for 10 years, and we will be fighting for as long as needed until Ukraine restores its territorial integrity. Now when that happens, that's going to be a crucial tipping point for the world on deciding what to do next. Because if Russia remains again just 10-15 kilometers from Ukrainian land, the repetition of the sad story of Ичкерия, when Russia left the territory of Ичкерия after the first war in 1997, but just kept its troops 10-15 kilometers from its borders, not only to regain the force and attack again, is going to be a very likely scenario for Ukraine as well. So in order to ensure long-term stability and long-term security for Ukraine and the Europe in general, we absolutely have to decide the question of the rule of law in Russia and the rule of international law and respect of human rights in Russia. And that means the respect of the right for self-determination of the people in Russia who were experiencing genocide all along. And this is the reason why Ukrainian parliament voted the resolution to support, to actually respond to the request of our Chechen colleagues and recognize the occupation of Ичкерия, which in my opinion every parliament in Europe should do. And that's a very good example of how we should think and approach the problem of Russia. That's a question of the rest of the nations of North Caucasus as well, as they are also seeking for independence. It's the question of recognition of Chechen people, and not only Chechen people, but other nations in their national capacity, not with their Russian passports, because they're not Russian citizens, as well as Ukrainians on the occupied territories are not Russian citizens. They are forcibly recognized so. And that's a policy that we should jointly develop with the European Union, with all our allies, to recognize the rights of the people that are occupied, the nations that are occupied by Russia. I think today is a perfect start, especially because next year Italy is chairing the G7. We can also start talking about it in a broader forum, as we're also going to be having the Global Partnership meeting on the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. And as you know, during the last forum, the forum of post-Russia, the representatives of three nations of Russia already adopted a resolution confirming that they are going to refuse nuclear status when their nations will gain independence, as Ukraine did in 1996. So we already have these practical examples of how to deal with it. We just shouldn't be afraid to say it out loud and start talking about it. And start talking about it now on all the levels diplomatically as well. Thank you.
I am Shamil Albakov. I am from France. I am the Vice Chairman of the North Committee for North Caucasus Nations. And I am also Honorary Consul of Ичкерия in France. So I will just say that we need from you a concrete position, a concrete support for our struggle. We will obtain the independence. We will have the liberty, because our nations are struggling for it throughout the history. But now there is a very, very horrible war going on in Ukraine, and Europe should help and support Ukraine, and in the same time support our struggle. We need concrete steps from the European countries: recognition of the independence of Ичкерия, recognition of genocide of Cherkessian people, support us politically and in the media, in all the medias. That's all we want. We want a concrete support, and we want you to inform that we will be free. The reality of tomorrow is a free Caucasus, a confederation of North Caucasian people with all the historical territories that Russia has occupied. Thank you very much, and I hope we will keep in touch.
I think we are approaching what I would say a new era in geopolitics, and the problem is, as the saying goes, we cannot see the forest because of the trees. The trees of the conflicts and the wars that Russia is currently sparking or spreading, whether in Ukraine or in the Middle East or even potentially in South America, the forest is the coming collapse of Russia itself. Because, as the Marxist-Leninists used to say, of its internal contradictions. Imperial overstretch, obsessive and self-destructive focus on the war against Ukraine, war economy and a war society that will drive down living standards dramatically and increase mass casualties. But we cannot, what I would say is we cannot simply sit by and wait for Russia's rupture. We must accelerate that process by, first of all, making sure that the West, and I include Ukraine as part of the West, actually defeats Russia militarily in Ukraine. We have to give them all the weapons as quickly as possible so that they drive out Russian forces as quickly as possible from the territory. So we can accelerate this process, but also at the same time start planning for a post-imperial Russia. As we used to say in America, I can't remember whether it was Johnson or which president said, we can do both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, or act militarily and plan politically at the same time. So I think Western leaders and legislatures, because I think parliaments, Congress always play a very important role, must plan for post-Russia. Help the subject nations and regions to find their voice, expand their support, and organize alternatives. We cannot simply assume that the end of Putin, or even Russia losing the war in Ukraine, will mean the end of the empire, or that Russia will become a Western partner. We've assumed this for too long. We had too many hopes in your Putins and Yeltsins and Medvedevs, and look where it led us. And we cannot assume at the same time that exiled or imprisoned Moscow liberals will democratize Russia. Again, false hopes. We've had too many of those. There's no Lenin out there that's got to come in and stage a revolution. I think we need to listen and discuss with alternative voices, and especially I think this forum network that is steadily developing is providing some concrete plans and voices for the future. We must support both social freedom and national independence. I personally don't think you have freedom unless you do have national independence. And as in the Soviet era, we must openly declare our values: human rights, democracy, pluralism, self-determination. Why can't citizens of Russia have the same as we do? This can, I think, help embolden citizens in Russia and demonstrate that they are not isolated on the world stage, despite Moscow's oppressive and isolationist policies. Very last point, unfortunately the West is not prepared for this, for what I'm talking about, for this emerging future, for managing Russia's rupture. I do have a book. There isn't an Italian version, unfortunately, but there is an English version, Ukrainian, there's a Russian version, Polish and Finnish are also coming out. So I'm covering the Slavic and Ugro-Finnic world. Hungarian version would be good, but tongue-in-cheek. But anyway, it has a few ideas of what we should be doing, what we should be planning. Thank you.
Okay. I already made a good promotion on your book, and my colleague will definitely buy online shortly.
He announced to the regions of the country, you can take like so much sovereignty as you can swallow. Okay, you know, we see here a representative of Ичкерия. Ичкерия wanted to become a sovereign state, and Russia invaded Ичкерия, and there was bloodbath, there was massacre. So other republics like Tatarstan, of course, they learned their lesson. Nobody wanted to follow that example. Then after, and it was Yeltsin who was considered a Democrat, right? Then there was Putin, and now we live in a totalitarian state in Russia. It is already not even authoritarian, it's totalitarian state. And it is not about personalities. It is about how the country can operate. It can only operate in this regime because when we have a little bit more democracy, then nothing is actually, they cannot hold it together because the country is so much centralized that all the power, all the wealth is concentrated in the Kremlin, and they cannot allow anyone else to be their own people. It's like it was the same during absolutism. And while in other countries they had constitutional monarchies, in Russia they couldn't allow it. And then after the revolution, there was communist regime, and the country cannot, actually this huge country, it cannot operate because they don't have other examples, and they don't know how to be a democratic country. And the process of the fall of the empire, it was stalled. Like first, after the First World War, there was a communist coup, then there was perestroika, and then this post-perestroika years. And the second stage was when the Soviet Union collapsed, right? And we have now new states instead of this huge Soviet Union. And I think that the world should allow the process to just to come to the logical end, so that there are new countries, new states should appear, and we need, in this stage, we need support in these first stages of nation building. As for the belief in, if the world wants to believe in the future and a better future, the world should listen to us.
We are in a very complicated situation, but things are changing. And I think this kind of discussion, which is happening, is really helping us understand things from a different perspective than we used to. So this is the first point of optimism. Second point, I think these discussions should go on. I mean, I've chaired the first parliamentary mission also to Odessa from this parliament. I've been to Ukraine many times, but the interest of the parliament towards anything that comes from the east is much bigger than it used to be a few years ago. And I think the suggestion that comes from Lyudmila about the global non-proliferation forum and the contribution that your movement can give there is something that can be taken up and can be developed in the next few days. We have a group working on non-proliferation, and I think it's very important to explain and to show that there are different feelings about non-proliferation, especially within Russia, and to make this known. Third point, which is democracy in the end. I think what the thinking that has to go on in our own space in the European Union is how to foster, how to promote, how to support experiments and will and necessity of democracy outside, including within Russia. I mean, the territorial and historical grievances and roots that you're bringing can find a peaceful solution in a democratic environment, not outside. And this is probably the best contribution. So another area where we can have a discussion and we can deepen relations is how to support this kind of thinking, this kind of practice, especially amongst young people. So I think these are three ideas that can come out of this meeting, and I really thank Gianni for his help and support and for putting us in contact. And I mean, I will be back in Ukraine in, I think, February. Maybe it's a good time to, maybe together. Certainly in Odessa together, which is a promise. So,